So we've done a bit of data analysis. We, by which I mean everyone today, we've learned about some cool science, we've learned about some cool practical conservation. So now it's mostly just me sitting here and musing about somewhere that I've been that I thought was cool. So in some ways it's a bit more like holiday snaps, but from a mile down the road rather than from somewhere exotic. And it's about what happens when you're stuck in the house and don't get to go very far away from the house, and what you end up finding when you get out and about. And where we ended up going for a fair few visits during the lockdown and pandemic period is a place called Monkey Island, which I never expected to be there. And then once I was there, I was blown away. So where we're talking about, we've got Medway at one end of the A2 and Sittingbourne at the other end of the A2, and about halfway in between is Newington, and just outside the edge of Newington there's Monkey Island adjacent to the A249. So it's there. And if you bring up like the Digimap habitat surveys, what it claims it is an area of broadleaved woodland. It's a little bit more fun than that. So if you're visiting it from the outside and you're looking in, you're standing in the middle of an arable field and staring at it. It doesn't really look like very much. It's just some sort of scrubby areas at the edge of a field. And it's mostly got kind of fields of wheat and things all around it. Although this patch here, the farmer tends not to cultivate, so that turns into a sort of like weird, wild, flowery area that gets quite nettly and thistly. So it's sort of weirdly isolated. But you can see it's a little bit higher than some of the surrounding land. What it is a relatively small site, so it's less than a hectare, and it's a mixture of heathland and sandpit and kind of wooded heathland. The name Monkey Island is a local name, so I've never seen it on any maps, but if you talk to people who've been in the village for years, they'll go, oh yes, that's that place. We're fairly sure it has nothing to do with primates, but maybe derived from something like Monk's Ayot, because there's kind of historical rumours that there used to be a church or even an abbey there. There's some fun stories that there was a priory and all of the nurses nuns got together and murdered the prioress in her bed, and then they evicted the nuns and replaced them with monks, and then they started murdering people as well. So it's got a little bit of a history, but there's no trace of any actual churches or structures around there that I've ever seen. So the most notable cultural reference that I've come across is that there's a local band called Billy Wears a Dress, and they've got a few songs that seem to refer to it tangentially. And it's also the name of a hole on the adjacent golf course. So that's Monkey Island. And when you're approaching it, it's a private site, but as far as we can tell, it seems to have been in habitual use by members of the public for 4 decades or more, at least, as far as I can tell. So you go up a track and you can see that it's starting to turn from look like the standard kind of thanet bed type stuff of the field into a more sandy mud, and you're walking through brambles, and then you start to get over the edge and suddenly it opens up into this whopping great big sand pit. And then it starts to get kind of more cool. So as you move through the site, you're getting into this area of heathland. So there's heather in reasonable condition in places, birch trees coming up, and lots of open areas. Because it's used very heavily by dirt bikers, and I'm not sure if the land manager knows about them, cares about them, or what, then it gets quite chewed up all the time. And on the one hand, that creates quite a lot of damage. On the other hand, presumably that's stopping some of the scrub from kind of encroaching on the site quite as much, and so does keep some of the areas a bit more open. And it's quite a sun trap, so it can get quite warm in the summer. And some of the sandy cliffs are basically south facing. And then once you get towards the edge of the site, as you approach the A249, then it starts to get wooded over. So you've got the birch trees coming up, and then you're starting to see a bit more kind of woodland vegetation. And then by the time you get down to the slope near the big road, then you're into kind of more normal woodland. And I think at that point it may be starting to tilt from heathland into chalk, which is kind of weird. So once I discovered this place, and it was pretty much everyone in the village kept mentioning it, but I'd never been there. So I rocked up just around the start of the lockdown on one of those one period of daily exercise things, I thought, wow, this is amazing. It's an interesting habitat. There's not that much heathland in Kent. So what's going on here? Is there anything interesting to find? And not knowing the first thing really about heathland biodiversity, then it's been quite a fun learning curve. But it's a bit of a challenging site because it's got quite a lot of heavy human influence, all of these dirt bikers and stuff. It gets terrible litter problems, and also there's nothing else really like it anywhere near, so what has a chance to colonize it is a bit of a question mark. So it's been a bit of a discovery finding what has made its way to this site and what it's doing there. By the end of 2020, between Simon and me, I think we'd recorded 36 aculeate Hymenoptera, and by 2021 we'd found a few more. So it seems to have a reasonable diversity of stuff going on, and that's just based on a handful of visits per year that we've managed to squeeze in around other stuff. Probably if someone really set out to explore it, you could find quite a few other things. So I'll walk you through a year at Monkey Island relatively quickly and give you a bit of a flavour of the sort of things we've come across. So we've got these wonderful sandy cliffs, and they seem to support a whole range of different bees and wasps. Nothing terribly rare, I think, that we've noticed just yet. 2020 had a lot of Andrena barbalabris, 2021 not so much, and a few other species, bees, and also wasps later in the year. So Colletes cunicularius is kind of fun. In the 1990s, up until the early noughties, it was pretty much restricted to a handful of sites in northwest England and western Wales. It was very much a kind of sand dune specialist around there. And then suddenly in 2011, something seemed to change. So this is the 2004 distribution that's up at the moment. And then by 2018 or so, it had spread inland from Wales and all around the Welsh coast. And also clusters of it had started to appear in southeastern England. So I don't know what's triggered this rapid change from a very rare bee to a relatively common one. But what I have been wondering is, the UK subspecies is really different from the continental one, both ecologically and when they did some like chemical ecology on the chemicals coming out of its Dufour's glands, they're totally different. So they may not even be sexually fully compatible anymore. So I have wondered whether the southeast is actually a kind of invasion from the continent.
Recording has stopped. This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. And yes, I don't know whether there's actually two populations going on, one kind of native and one sort of introduced, and what might happen if they meet in the middle. That could be quite fun to discover. But anyway, it's totally different from all of the other Colletes species in the UK, more or less. So most of our Colletes species are kind of summer to autumn things. They're quite small, they're only a little bit hairy, and they're quite stripy. This is in spring, it's quite big, it's hairy all over, not particularly stripy. And so they're using mostly willow. Weirdly, outside the UK, the males of this species are pollinators of Ophrys exaltata, and they're doing it by sexual deception. So the orchid smells like their female sex pheromone and they're attracted to that. But I guess because we don't have that in the UK, then they're not going to be doing that. So they'll at least get a break from being sexually deceived over here. Another thing that we found quite a lot of is the Andrena barbalabris, which we saw absolutely loads of in 2020, not so much last year. So it'd be interesting to see whether this is on a sort of 2-year boom and bust cycle or whether there's something else going on with that. And that's quite a cute little bee. And it's the sandpit bee, so why wouldn't it be there? Then what we also found was the nomada that's the kleptoparasite of that. So Albo guttata's not been seen very often in Kent, and it's only turned up here relatively recently. So it was quite cool to find it. But given that there was a big population of Andrena barbalabris, I guess it's not that surprising that the nomada species there as well. So that was kind of fun. Then moving into the summer, how are we doing for time? All right. This was when the wasps really started to come into their own. So we started to notice Ammophila species, I'm assuming Sabulosa. These are kind of cool. So they're kind of partway between a parasitoid and a predator in the way, because the adults will catch the wasps, catch the caterpillars, and then sting them, carry them off and put them in their tunnels, and then lay their eggs on the outside of the caterpillars. And then the offspring kind of parasitize inside the caterpillars. They hide their little nest with a little pile of like tiny, tiny pebbles. So it's quite cute. But the females are like completely burgling each other and being really brutal to each other's nests. Sometimes they'll steal another female's caterpillars and fly off with them. Sometimes they'll kill the larvae of another female on the outside of the caterpillars and then lay their own. So they're quite a complicated, like, cool natural history going on that I thought was rather amazing. We also found Odinera Spinnipes, and I guess the first thing you notice when you come to a place with these wasps is these remarkable chimneys that they're building with this kind of amazing like lacework pattern. And apparently the flight patterns of these are like weird and zigzagged. And so they've been actually researched by academics in the past to try and understand how insects kind of navigate their environment and use their vision to have complex flight patterns like that. So it's quite a remarkable wasp, and we've got a little video that may or may not, there we go. And then the wasp emerges from that chimney. So they were quite fantastic. So we saw quite a lot of those in 2020, not so many in 2021. The other wasp that caught our attention is this one, Oxybellis Unigloomus. And this is a specialist in hunting kind of musky diptera and things about that size. And the most remarkable thing about this is that it uses its sting as kind of a skewer. So they'll initially catch the fly and sting it once in the kind of cluster of nerves inside the fly's thorax. And they're really quite good at doing that with like precision accuracy. And then they've got this fly. And initially they kind of carry it in a normal way, but the last meter or so back to the burrow, they impale the fly onto their sting. So you see this little wasp kind of scrabbling through the sand that seems to be kind of dragging a fly on its bottom. So it's quite amazing, and you can watch them for quite some time with absolute fascination. Another thing that I noticed was a noon fly. They're not uncommon, but given that they're a specialist in especially cow dung, I have no idea where the nearest cows are. I assume they're using horse dung from some of the stables around, but even so, the nearest kind of horse area is probably 1 kilometre away nearly. So exactly why it had turned up there, who knows? Moving out of the sandpit areas and into the more heathy areas, it tended to switch from some of the more kind of slightly more interesting species to some of the more kind of common generic stuff. So things like Andrena nitida, which is just a common spring bee, and various of the sort of normal bombus species. But there's a really good population of tiger beetles, which is quite fun. And it's still very sandy around there. But as we head into autumn, I think the star of the show is pretty much the Colites succinctus. So this is a heather specialist bee, and you can see it looks pretty much identical. And I don't know why I'm telling many of you this, because you know this much better than I do, but it looks pretty much identical to the ivy bee and is really closely related. But rather than specialising in ivy, it specialises in heather, and identifying the difference between them is an absolute nightmare and was horrible. But you can see they got up to really high populations in some autumn times. So they're absolutely swarming over pretty much the whole area that was sandy and catching the sun, which I guess is unsurprising given that the resource that they need is there. Another thing that I did spot was this fantastic caterpillar that I eventually worked out was a beautiful yellow underwing. It's another heather specialist, so it's perfectly normal to find it there. But I guess because Kent doesn't have that many patches of heathland, then the records from Kent are a little bit scattered and patchy, but you can see across the country as a whole, it's quite a common species. There's also loads and loads of fungi there, and I really don't have names for most of them, but they look cool. The fly agarics were quite fun. The trouble is that the site has been discovered by some local mushroom, or maybe not so local mushroom picking groups. So they do get pretty much harvested anything edible by the end of the autumn, which is a little bit sad. But one thing that I'd really love to do at some point would be to visit with somebody who knows anything about bryophytes and lichens, because there seem to be lots of really cool looking things there, but I have no idea whether it's all the common stuff or whether there's anything that's kind of noteworthy or interesting there. And likewise, the botany, I've only started to scratch the surface because my botany is not that great. So what's going to happen in the future? Well, the land's privately owned by, I think, one of the local farmers. Newington is quite a target for developers because of the location and the kind of vague infrastructure. So there are literally teams of potential developers scoping out sites. So that's not a great thing. But the site itself is far enough away from sort of suitable connecting roads that I don't think it would be a target in the immediate future. But there's probably more threats coming from the fact that the condition is quite poor. It's getting gradually overtaken with bramble in some areas. The dirt bikers are continually chewing it up, and I don't know how that will change in the future. And the fact that it is kind of ecologically isolated, I don't even know where the nearest other patch of heathland is from there to anywhere else. So repopulating it with heathland specialists could be a slow process. And we still don't know enough about the site. As far as I can tell from kind of local knowledge, it's been going on pretty much like this for at least the last 4 decades. So maybe it'll carry on like this for a while longer. But I'd be really interested in what else we perhaps should be looking out for on a site like this that might make it a bit more notable, perhaps. And I suppose the moral is that there's amazing stuff that can be found really closer than you think. So yeah, thank you for putting up with my marvellous meander, and yeah, happy to discuss. I see the chat's been pinging.